curl up with a good book and, not venture. So I appreciate it. And I just want to give a quick shout out to my childhood friend, Lauren Schultz, who came all the way up from San Antonio. And one thing that isn't in my bio, but perhaps should be, is I did my undergraduate work here at the University of Texas in Austin. I haven't been back to Austin in 14 years, but one of my most beloved professors is here tonight, and I'm so glad, Mr. Dr. Kurt Heinzelman. So thanks for coming. All right, so I'm going to read a bit from the book and then read some newer poems from my current manuscript, which I'm shopping about. The only thing that you should know about these poems are that the book, I grew up in Key West, as you heard from my bio, and the poems are mostly autobiographical about growing up in Key West. So that's really, I think, the only thing you need to know about them. Winter Elegy. When the cool fronts gusted through, we called it Christmas. We'd crank open all the jalousie windows, and for the rest of that year and into the next, the slamming of doors was only the wind's rage. It blew through our house, diffusing the seaweed collecting at the canal's dead end, my mother's cinnamon candles and pine, sugar apples ripening on the tree, and at night, blossoms of cacti in the corner of the yard. Half asleep with the windows open, I could hear the rustling of palms and bottle brush, blinds slapping against screens, and at some point every night, the scream of a cat fight, and my mother going out to break it up, then back to bed. Through my bedroom windows, I'd hear her settle in, that overture of sighs and low moans, and my father's constant snore lulled me back to sleep. And I never imagined this was not the way it would always be. Daddy at the stove. He's bare-chested. Fish blood and scales sequin his bathing suit. Grease pops in the cast iron. With blade and forefinger, he pulls the vertebrae from the snapper he caught this morning, discards it. He slaps it in egg wash, then cornmeal, then sizzling pan, tells me and his grandkids the same age as I am to stand back, go play quiet. We slink off to the tiled cave of the Florida room, play Scorpion Family, one arm crooked above our heads, four fingers sting. From the sofa's peak, I see my daddy barefoot at the stove, silver hair uncombed and salty, his tongs a scepter. I'm going to read this poem for Greg Brownderville, who's also reading with me. Greg and I did our MFAs together at Ole Miss, and we both have an affinity for muscadine grapes, so this poem's about that. Muscadine grapes, Sewanee County, Florida. Late summers, we'd forage through yarrow and milkweed in the front yard of the house we owned but never lived in. My sister and I would mouth the globes whole, pop the skins with our molars, tongue flesh from seed, rain dance around our father's makeshift arbor. We'd turn the pits loose in the yard, call it farming. We'd tiptoe barefoot across the spread tarpaulin, so dizzy it could have been the sky, our tongues dry from so much tasting. The only thing that you need to know about this next poem is when I mentioned a bufo, I don't know if you guys have bufos here in Austin, but they're a poisonous toad. And they're very dangerous in Key West because if your dog gets a hold of them, they could die. So usually what my parents would do when we would get a bufo would be, one, either kill it with a shovel, which is awful, or two, put it in a garbage can and pour ammonia on it and let it cry, and it would cry like a baby. And it was, horrible. No. I could never do it. There's a poem about that, doing that in here, but I'm not going to read it. but when you're welcome. But when I say bufo eggs, that's what I mean. That poisonous toad. Okay, sandbar at Snipes Keep. Before the divorce, we used to picnic on the first Sunday of each month, even in winter. My father would belly his pontoon on the sandbar, then my extended family swung single file down the ladder wearing sneakers. It was too shallow for swimming and not all sand, but coral heads and bottles, long-spined sea urchins, perhaps stingrays. Arm in arm, we made a chain from the boat to shore in flowered or fluorescent bathing suits, like a long swatch of milky bufo eggs, to stake our claim on that small tongue of sand. My father would carve a pit in the beach, make fire with mangrove limbs, spear a hogfish and roast it before it was dead, squeezed lime hissing the fire down. Then he'd stretch out on the sand, his arms folded under his head like a skywatcher. His snore was like wave crash. Giggling, I poured buckets full of sand over him. Mixed with salt water, it was cement. Then I built a series of castles around him. He'd sleep like that, pretending not to know I was there. Or was he pretending? During one of these Sundays, our engine broke down, and to get us home, he jumped in, pulled the pontoon by the anchor rope over his shoulder, trudged the 3 bay miles to our dock. His hands and back blistered. That night, he stood out on the back deck, and my mother poured a bottle of peroxide over him, which fizzed like sea foam over his body. He saw me see him wince, then exaggerated his wincing with cartoonish eeks and acks. He let me wind his palms with gauze. I fell asleep with my head on his scorched chest, despite the rifle cracks of some John Wayne movie, both of us in his cigar-burned, soft gray lazy boy. He was fond of saying, "Man is greater than any misery." Out there on the sandbar, it was easy to forget about my parents' last fight, the smack of his truck door. It felt good just to dig my hands in the muck by the shoreline, to try and bury my father so deep in the earth he'd never leave. Elegy for a Murdered Friend, in memory of Aya Katubi, 1979 to 2003. Months after your murder, I went back to the limestone underbelly of the Saddle Key Bridge, where as girls we scratched our names and the names of boys. Back then, our mouths were red with stolen wine. We wore hoops in our ears, our jeans too tight. The tide took years to erode our words. Left were things of bridge dwellers, mattress ticking, beer cans, palm fronds twisted to roses. Nothing else changed. Not the salt pond stink, not the Navy jets screaming overhead, not the 2-note heartbeat sound of cars on US 1 above. This is where I knew you before you met the man. This is how I'll remember you. Blonde hair, red lips, rock in your hand. And I'll read one more from the book and then some new poems. December evening, Key West. Tonight, I sat on the seawall behind the house I've lived in 20 years, watching mullet turn circles in the canal. Impossible to count how many. It always looked like more spiraling in from the unprotected bay. They raised their silver bellies to the sun, flashing like strobe lights underwater. Something unseen hunts them, most likely barracuda. Occasionally, one or a few leap from the edge to the hub. The ripple rings expand and disappear. The school, a gilded body, plunges 3 feet, its lights subdue, shapes distort. On a whim, one brave or stupid fish pilots them back. They form a plane, then vortex, octagon, what could be a shield. We sold this place last week. I thought of the mullet swimming the still canal and wondered how they never tired of turning their bellies to the sun. How close I came to jumping in. The new poems are from the current manuscript that I'm working on is called Minor Territories. East Coast Lament. I wake some bright morning remembering the clean taste of you, your fingers ribboned in my hair less silver than, or how you always walk the dark blocks late back to your sparse apartment. I left red doors in dangerous cities unlocked. You used to grab me from behind, your tongue on my ear. Where you went in your mind, I wanted to follow, those narrow paths carved in deep snow. Then your breezing in and your mouth was light, airy, the kisses platonic, then not at all. I let the last lease run out, wheeled what wouldn't fit in the too small rented car to the sidewalk. You stood on the petal-blown street. I drove south, unmapped, not knowing then what would have made you follow. Nest. My grandmother said a bird's nest in the home is good luck. I carry her glass-enclosed specimen from house to house. It doesn't count. A week before my new teaching post began, we moved to South Carolina, that too big, two-story, where I found the nest primed with pine straw and snakeskin behind the stove. The bird book says wrens will like an old boot better than any wooden structure. My husband slept in his truck many nights. All that hot August, I watched our house fill, then slowly clear of his things. At first, he took only his fishing clothes and papers, returned weeks later for his weight set and watch, a pat on our baby's head, and he was gone. If wrens mate for life, what happened to these? Even their call is a domestic tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. I hope it was a cold wind that caught him, and not a better lightning bolt making its arch over another female's eye. Last poem, thanks for being here. Peach Tree Late Summer. At the nursery, I ask my daughter, who's 2.5, to choose a sapling. She trips through the spindly trunks and black plastic buckets, pulls leaves off to study them. She even chews them, spits, and wipes the back of her mouth with her hand. Wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, proclaims finally, apple twee. But we're in Mississippi, where apples won't grow. Our love affair with winter is short-lived. It often blankets our brown river valley with a dusting of overnight snow, a delight given, then taken back too soon. Heat muscles in when it shouldn't. I purchase a peach because she says the leaves are shaped like green bananas, like green half moons, like green sickles. And because she was born in Georgia, the only place we were ever a complete family, though she has no memory of it, and I envy that. Digging through clay in mid-September is like putting a shovel to concrete. Not young anymore, my knees grind, the old tennis elbow acts up. We wet the ground, she holds the garden hose and drinks from it, though no one's ever taught her how. I replace the useless orange clay with store-bought soil. We plant the tree, old as she is but twice as tall, and tamp the earth. Her first lesson in disappointment, that what we want is often never what we can have. Even second best takes leverage, sweat, muscle, and bone work. Where we end doesn't look much different than where we began. A tree is still a tree in the ground or in a pot, and peach will never taste clean like apple. Thanks for being here.